Hi, welcome to a new video, and it's camera review time and my continuing quest for an everyday carry 35mm film camera. So what we're looking at today is the Olympus, but this is an XA. I've also got an XA2 which I'm currently running film through, and we'll talk about that one once I've finished running film through it. But yeah, the Olympus XA. Go on, get in focus. There we go. Now, it's not always immediately obvious that it's an XA from the front, which is why if I just turn over and show you the top there, again, give that a moment to get in focus, you'll see it says XA at the top. This one, as you can will notice, also has the A11 flash attached to it. For those of you who don't know the XA series, one of the great things about these is the flash units separate from the camera, so if you don't need flash, you've got an incredibly small camera, one of the smallest 35mm cameras ever made. And the flash, which just takes a little single AA battery in there, goes on the side. Now, before I talk about the pros and cons behind the XA, I want to talk about this particular XA. Because I paid £50 for this, which is well below market value for a working XA. I checked yesterday and they are currently running anywhere in the range of, I think the lowest I saw for a guaranteed working model was about £150. And that went all the way up to one place for one that appeared to be absolutely mint, original boxed everything, which was around £400. So £50 is easily below the minimum value that you'd normally find these for. And that's because I bought this as completely untested, unknown condition, and sold as seen. So what did I get? Well, it's certainly not perfect. For a start, and one thing I didn't pick up from the pictures, is it didn't actually have a battery door. So if I just grab my XA2, you'll see the XA2 has a little fairly standard screw-in battery door there. That was missing on the XA. So basically I put the batteries in, put some silver foil on top to make sure it was making contact, put a 5p piece on top of it, British currency, don't you know, and then some electrical tape, just some insulating tape over the top of it in black, so it does have a little bump at the bottom now, but it works perfectly well in that regard, so it does still work and shoots exactly as you'd expect it to. So what about the rest of it for my £50? Well, it's certainly worn and had a little bit of rust I had to clean off. You can see how worn it is there just from the door. There's a fair amount of use and wear on there. The rangefinder itself was fairly heavily de-silvered, so it was really difficult to use. A little trick, and I hope you can see this, I'm going to have to get fairly close in, but you'll notice that I've just put, there we go, that's showing that reasonably well, a little bit of black insulating tape, so black electrical tape, just a little rectangle of it I've cut off slap bang in the middle, and what this basically does is it cuts down light coming through the viewfinder, which means the light coming from the rangefinder window just there is brighter, and it makes the rangefinder much easier to use. Nice little trick if you ever pick up a rangefinder camera and you find that the silvering has gone on it, so it's really difficult to see through the rangefinder. Just pop a little bit of tape on there. You may need to play around with exactly where it needs to go, and bingo, you will have almost certainly a functional rangefinder again. So it works extremely well. Other issues with this one, the clamshell for the door, as you can see with what I just did there. I don't want to do it too much. It is not attached properly, so it's actually got we can just see there a break in the plastic, so that is broken. Oh, and the frame counter doesn't work, and the shutter button, which interestingly on the XAs were notorious, and the entire XA series actually, for being very light, and if you brushed them they went off. This one does require a more vigorous press on there, but all of the important bits, the rangefinder accuracy, the metering, the exposure. So for those of you who don't know, the XA is, and I should really have mentioned this, it's an aperture priority camera with a lovely fast 35mm f2.8 lens on it, and it really is a lovely sharp lens that these have got on there. Very, very nice, particularly for its age. I think 1979 the XA came out, and I think it ran up until about 1985. So that's the basics of it. This was a very ropey copy with a number of quite clear faults to it, but it is working. Had to clean it up quite a lot, but I ended up with what I think is probably one of the cheapest XAs I've seen that has ended up being functional, so I'm quite pleased with that. Now, despite its failures, what do I think about it as an everyday carry camera? Truth be told, I've had an XA in the past, a very long time ago, and I absolutely love these little things. They're eminently pocketable, so they are very small, and if you know you're going out and you're not going to need the flash, you can take it off, or you can take the flash off, pop the camera in one pocket, pop the flash in another pocket, and you've got a very carryable camera. There is a trick to these that not everybody knows. You can effectively turn these into a nice little point and shoot, because the rangefinder, simply due to the compact nature of the camera, isn't actually the easiest thing to use. I mean, if you look at how much you've got between 3 meters and infinity there, so the 3 meters is in reddy orange, it's not exactly a huge amount of movement on there, so using the rangefinder you have to be very careful. There is a trick if the light is good enough, and that is you set it to that red 3, you set your aperture, which you'll notice is also at 5.6, yep, 5.6, marked in orange, and you now effectively have set the camera up to be pretty much point and shoot. So if you shoot with it on the 3 meters and on 5.6, what you're effectively going to get is you're looking at the hyperfocal distance for the camera. So everything from 3 meters to infinity will be in focus, and everything down to roughly 1.5 meters will be in focus. So it effectively turns it into a nice little zone focus point and shoot, and you can use it just as that, quite literally. And I've used that to take shots very surreptitiously where I've basically, you're obviously not going to be able to see it, where I just hold the camera down by my side, so it's in my hand like that, or like that, and I can then just hit the shutter button as I'm walking along. And I've used that for quite a few shots, and both now and in the past, and it works extremely well. The pros behind this, well, one, it's a fairly, or rather it's a small 35mm camera you've got a lot of control over. Because it's aperture priority, it does tell you what the shutter speed's going to be in via a needle in the viewfinder. You've got a rangefinder, so you've got control over it. You know, it is a fairly manual camera. It's not fully manual, and I want to be quite clear about that. The XA, which a lot of the other later XA models didn't have, does also have a backlight compensation button on it, which you activate simply by flicking the little lever at the bottom out, and this has a number of functions. So you've got 1.5 stops of exposure compensation. It's also got battery check and then self timer there, and when the lever's out on the self timer, that actually acts as a little stand to steady the camera as well, which is really quite nice. But as I was saying before, I distracted myself there. It is, it gives you a fair degree of control over what and how you're shooting. Another pro behind it, without a shadow of a doubt, is the lens. That 35mm f2.8 is incredibly good. It's nice and fast. It's a bit of a miracle of engineering for the size of the camera, because I believe, if I'm correct, the actual length of the lens is shorter than the focal length it operates on, which required some very clever engineering. Don't ask me how they did it, but they did it, and that's what you get. And really the final pro behind it, as I say, is its... Actually, no, there is one more after this, is its tiny size. The final pro, which I nearly forgot about, so my apologies, is actually this flash unit. Now, the A11 has a guide number of around about 1011. There is a larger A16 flash unit you can get, which has a guide number of 16 on it, but it's quite a bit bigger and takes 2 AA's, so I'm not a big fan of that one. I like the A11, it's a good size. Is actually a decent performer. It's got that quite hard direct flash look to it, but if you're shooting black and white, as I've done in these flash photos in the video, it's got a look that is of a time, you know, the 80s, but I actually think it looks quite good. I personally like the aesthetic behind it, and it is a decent performer for an automatic flash of its vintage. Flash use realistically is either 100 or 400 ASA though, so that is kind of a negative on it. And with that, we'll now start talking about some of the cons behind the camera. Con-wise, well, there's not actually that many, being perfectly honest with you. I mean, you've got to like the fact that it's manual, as I say. The flash, 100 or 400 ASA, really you have to be shooting that because that's where the auto ranges work, and if you wanted to whack some 200 ASA in there or something similar, you're going to run into a few problems with that. Also, the ISO range, sorry, it's a film camera, the ASA range on it is a little limited. Now this again is merely a product of its time, and actually for its time it had quite a advanced range of ASA on there, so it will go down as low as 25, which is really nice. So back in the day that would have been used predominantly to shoot slide film on it. The Kodachromes went down to 25 in that regard, 25 ASA. If my memory serves me, I'm sure there was other 25 ASA slide films as well, and it will top out at 800 ASA. Now 800 ASA was back in the late 70s, even for semi-pro level, that was absurdly fast film. And most of the time that was 400 ASA film pushed to 800 ASA. So as a contemporary setup, it's actually fairly advanced and not that limiting. For a camera being used today where you can easily pick up, you know, 1600 ASA, 3200 ASA film, it feels a little limiting in that regard. But it's not the end of the world, particularly if you're using it as an everyday carry. I tend to just stick to 400 ASA films in these. It gives you quite a bit of versatility, unless the weather's really bright, in which case I'll then again tend to stick to 100 ASA. But it would be remiss of me not to point it out. And the final con is, as I say, the rangefinder can take a little bit of getting used to, because even when they're in excellent condition, the actual rangefinder square that you're using to overlap the two images is very small. In direct light, it's not always the easiest thing to see through and get a decent image off of it, and the little lever that you are using for it down here is again not the easiest thing to use. It is very tiny, and because of the small nature of it, the throw on it is very small, particularly, as I say, between 3 meters and infinity. It's a very small range, so it is something that some people just don't get on with, and it's worth pointing out. So that's the Olympus XA. Would I recommend one? Again, so long as you're aware of the shortcomings, which I don't think are that significant myself, absolutely. They're a stunning camera, but they do fetch a premium as a result. I mean, if you can get a good one for around the £150 mark, I think that's a decent price to pay for one. The £50 I paid for this was, well, to be honest, I took a chance on it, not necessarily expecting it to work or to have significant problems with it. It didn't have those, which I was quite lucky about, but it is a gamble to take without a shadow of a doubt. Is it worth spending 400 quid on one? Not quite so sure on that, being perfectly honest. There's a lot you can get for 400, but for around the 150, 200, yes, I think they do rate well, and it is probably currently in the lead for my everyday carry camera that I am looking for from a film point of view. And I've got to be honest, the slightly distressed and partially functional nature of it, in fairness, the only bit that genuinely isn't working is the frame counter, which I can live with, does actually help out in that regard, because it's not something I worry about just throwing in my everyday carry bag and carrying around with me. So yeah, that is the Olympus XA, an absolute classic of a camera, and one that is, in my view, well worth hunting out if you are looking for a compact, well-featured 35mm film camera that you can easily carry around with you with an excellent little lens. So there we go. Thanks very much for watching. Apologies for the cold. Hopefully it's coming to the end now and didn't distract from the video too much. But take care everyone, and if you did enjoy this video, please do hit the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified when new videos get uploaded. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye bye.